Supporters of President Donald Trump are continuing to defend his criticism of museums like the Smithsonian over having exhibits on things like, I don't know, the historical events like slavery, for example.
Clay, Donald Trump is very media savvy, and he had to know that using that phrase about slavery would spark an enormous backlash.
I think he's right. Look, the Democrat Party is at historic lows in support because they focus almost exclusively on the things that America has done wrong. They focus on the floor, if you want to use a metaphor, of the country as opposed to the ceiling. What are our soaring aspirations and goals? That is what Donald Trump believes that our museum should reflect. Look, I took my son to the Smithsonian, I think the Air and Space Museum. They do a fabulous job of putting on the history of air and space. I didn't see a single report inside the Air and Space Museum about plane crashes and the thousands of people who have died in them. That doesn't mean that they don't exist. That doesn't mean that they aren't a substantial part of history of space and exploration and plane travel. But the Air and Space Museum, by and large, is an aspirational story from Orville and Wilbur Wright all the way up to the modern day space station and beyond. And you leave, as I left with my sons, incredibly excited about the future. I think that's what President Trump wants the story of other Smithsonians to be like.
Other Smithsonians? You mean other museums? Because that's what they are. There's only one Smithsonian. Okay. So hold on. So we can't talk about disasters then? Well, I mean, yeah, it doesn't mean that they're not a substantial part of the history. I just don't want to talk about it. Oh, you don't want to talk about the bad stuff. You just don't even want to talk about the good stuff. Oh, okay. But here's the thing. Again, you admit that this is an important part of our history, right? How do we learn as human beings? We mess up and then we learn from our mistakes. And so, for example, the Challenger disaster is a kind of a big moment in space flight right there, and we learn from that. And so, I mean, look, you can't ignore the bad stuff and only focus on the good, because again, if you do not learn from the bad history, then you're going to repeat that bad history. Most people understand that, apparently, except for Clay Travis. Okay, and again, the Smithsonian, yes, it features exhibits and reports on aviation disasters, as well as other negative things, as well as positive things. The aspiration there should be, oh, we did this terrible thing, but then we did better later. Shouldn't that be, isn't that the message? Really? I mean, yes, we did terrible things. We got black marks all over our history. But then we decided as a country, let's not do that again. Let's do better. I mean, how does he not get that? How does he not get that? Again, you know why he doesn't get that? Is because he's defending Donald Trump. Okay. Look, this weird attempt to equate like plane crash victims to the chattel slavery of millions of Americans is kind of weird. Okay. You can't exactly turn that or Jim Crow into an aspirational story, or again, maybe you can. Hey, celebrating the abolitionists, right? All right. People like John Brown. Okay. But I am guessing that is not something someone like Clay Travis or President Donald Trump really would like to celebrate. Okay? I'm just saying. In fact, one of their biggest lies actually depends on people not knowing history. Okay? And why? What do I mean by that? Well, look, I'm pretty sure you have heard a right-winger, if you've ever been in an argument with a right-winger, talking about how, it was the Democrats, you're the party of slavery. Actually, no. While it is true that the Republican Party did outlaw slavery, okay, what the right does not want you to know is that Southern conservatives were not Republicans back then. Oh no, you see, the Republican Party actually had no presence in the South before and during the Civil War. Hmm, interesting. See, the South at the time was solidly Democrat, who at the time was pro slavery. So, like, if you only take, like, if you don't have any sort of understanding of actual historical events, then you could be like, ah, see, Republicans are the party of freedom. They're the party of freedom, and the Democrats are the party of slavery and racism. Actually, no. See, by the year 1860, the National Democratic Party ended up actually splitting into both the northern and southern factions over the issue of slavery's expansion. You see, slavery, big thing in the South, not exactly big in the North. Okay. Northern Democrats, however, at the time had supported basically your version of states' rights. Okay. Popular sovereignty, which allowed the territories at the time to decide for themselves on the issue of slavery. Again, your modern states' rights movements, right? Southern Democrats, however, their leadership went on to insist that slavery be protected by the federal government, the institution of owning other human beings. And again, one of the reasons is slave plantation owners were very wealthy. And one of the reasons that they were very wealthy is because they didn't have to pay little things like labor. Yeah. And there you go. And so there it is. Now, that said, the Republican Party of the North eventually became dominated by wealthy businessmen. As the North had industrialized, the South did not. Now, as a result of that, they tended to favor laissez-faire policies, neoliberal policies, which support big corporations, big business. Now, a lot of those same business owners eventually got into politics. They ran for office, and after they won, they gave up on Reconstruction. That's it. They gave up on Reconstruction. And it wasn't until the Great Depression and FDR that Democrats actually started to resemble more what, we see as a party of today. Now, it took until, of course, up until the Civil Rights era for the party to do a complete flip. All right. To where now you have conservatives that are Republicans and liberals that are Democrats. Okay. In 1964, President Lyndon Johnson signed the Civil Rights Act into law, leading black voters who had historically been loyal to the Republican Party because of the 1866 Civil Rights Act to switch en masse to the Democrats. And there you go. As a result, the Southern Democrats switched over into becoming Republicans. So that's a lot of information. Obviously, there's, a lot more to it. A lot of nuance and stuff, but that's essentially the gist of it. Okay. And the reason I bring it up is because, once again, you have all these Republicans saying, Democrats, party of racism and slavery. And now Republicans couldn't possibly be racist. Are you sure? Again, this is why history is important. All right. And why Trump and Republicans are now attempting to erase that history. Look, on Thursday, the White House released a bullet list of exhibits at the Smithsonian, as well as educational programs that kind of trigger them. They want to get rid of, okay? And you're not going to be surprised by any of them. I'm not going to go through all of them. But just for example, right, they want to get rid of the National Museum of African American History and Culture, which covers white privilege. Yeah. Not only that, but the American History Museum's exhibit on Benjamin Franklin, which directs visitors to learn more about the enslaved people in his household. They also want to, get rid of the LGBTQ plus history exhibit. And not only that, but they want to change the American History Museum's American Democracy exhibit. Here's what it said on the White House page. They say that claims that voter integrity measures are just attempts to minimize the political power of new and diverse groups of Americans, while its sections on demonstrations includes only leftist causes. The document in which this comes from reads like a post on Glenn Beck's blog. Okay, that's really it. It would be comical, but it's, again, literally on the official White House website. It's a government document, and so not good. We have a government that is basically hostile to facts. It is hostile to history, which is kind of ironic because these are the same people that claim that taking down the statues that celebrated Confederate generals was erasing history, which it's not, because they're still in history books. I mean, still in museums, some things like that. What a statue is that it essentially commemorates as well as celebrates certain individuals. Just saying. And again, the whole idea of, you see, you're not going to learn history if you take down a statue. No, that's a ridiculous argument. It's not true. No, there's really only one reason why someone would want to actually erase history. It's when you would like to repeat it. Okay, that's one of the problems. Repeating all the horrible mistakes we've made as a country. I mean, we are already repeating some of these things. For example, Japanese internment, right? During World War II, the U.S. government rounded up Japanese people and shoved them into camps. Sound familiar? Instead of Japanese people, it's immigrants from Central America, generally. Not good. And of course, we know from history that it doesn't really stop with one group of people. Okay, again, it never does. And if you actually know and study your history and are allowed to do so, then you would know that. And know that we are heading down a very, very dark road that will, in the future, people will look back, because it will be their history, and they'll be like, what the hell were these people thinking? Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please like, share, subscribe, hit the bell icon in order to get notified whenever a new video is released. And if you want to support independent, progressive media through this difficult time where it seems like everybody is shutting down, you can become a member on our YouTube page, you can become a subscriber on Facebook, or you can go to my Patreon. It's patreon.com/Jeff Waldorf. Thank you.